Although our current style of living protects us a great deal, everyone has at some point encountered dangers to their survival. Darwin called these the hostile forces of nature. Hello, my friend. This is chapter 3 of David Bass's summary of the book Evolutionary Psychology. So, if you didn't watch the chapter 2 and 1, I highly recommend that you watch the chapters. And you will conclude that in each chapter we are getting better and better. So, let's go to the video. These chapters have the title Combating the Hostile Forces of Nature. And we're going to start talking about the hostile forces of nature. This chapter basically says that survival has always involved multiple threats. We are talking about climate and weather extremes, food scarcity and spoilage, toxin, parasites, infectious diseases, predators, and other humans as competitors and aggressors. Darwin had summed it up as the struggle for existence. He has a quote that says that, quote, as more individuals are produced than can possibly survive, there must in every case be a struggle for existence. Either one individual with another of the same species, or with the individuals of distinct species, or with the physical conditions of life. Great. So this Darwin struggle for existence talks about competition within species, competition between species, constraints imposed by environment. So now we pass and talk about human survivor intelligence. Humans involve specialized cognitive systems to manage biology, distinguish edible vs poisonous food, identifying predators and prey, learning ecological regularities. Folk biology reflects evolved knowledge, not formal science. So, now talking about food acquisition and selection. Food is the primary fuel for survival. Evolutionary pressure shaped food seeking, food evaluation, and food sharing. Ancestral humans faced uncertainty, seasonal shortages, high foraging costs. So it's not like now in the 21st century that we go to the grocery, we buy every food that we want, we buy meat, we buy vegetable, we buy like hyper palatate sweets. I don't know how to say in English. In Portuguese is hiperpalatáveis, comidas hiperpalatáveis, hyperpalates, I think is in English. But anyway, talking about now, in the past was hard to get food and to save food. Social and cultural functions of food. We're gonna talk about that now. Food sharing strengthens alliance and group cohesion, signals generosity, status, and mating value. Failure to provide food lowers male status. This is a great point. This is a great point. Failure to provide food lowers male status. In some tribes, as the Tonga from Nigeria, the women seek to divorce husband that cannot provide food. Okay? Great. Food is deeply embedded in language, in religion, in mythology. Religion, we are talking about Adam and Eve and the apple. We're talking about like Jesus when he multiplied the fish that he had in the bread. In language, when we say is hard, some information hard to digest, is like food too, and language, and on and on and on. Perfect. Food preference and economics. Food dominates household spending worldwide. Indicates persistence, adaptive importance, and psychological salience of food. And a good point here is that without food, all of all will die. So in more developed countries as the US, there are data that show that about 20% of the paycheck that the Americans and other people that are in America wastes with food. 20% is waste on food in America, about 20%. There's some data that show that. And in less developed countries as China or India, about 50% of the paycheck is spent solely on food. Great. So we have some evolved food adaptation. For example, infancy. The breastfeeding prevents early toxin exposures. Taste system. Sweet indicates good and have calories. Bitter or sour indicates toxin and that we should avoid. That's why kids don't like to eat vegetables, because vegetables have some, they have toxin within the vegetables. Another great point is that in many plants we have a substance there that we humans as humans can't digest. So yeah, but it's good for the belly and the stomach, and it's good, it's fibrous, have some type of fibers. But anyway, this does not appear on the book. This is knowledge that I have from other areas, and I'm helping you to understand a little bit. So physiological regulation is one of the food adaptations. And we have neophobia. Neophobia is help us avoid annose toxins, and is reduced through social modeling. Humans and rats have many similarities, and rats and humans too, we see this in infants, doesn't like to taste new foods. That's why if foods infants like are reluctant to try new food. But rats too, who are mammals, that don't like to try new food too. This is what we call neophobia, because and have a function, the neophobia, because it helps avoiding unknown toxins. Good point. So disgust and disease avoidance. Disgust function as a behavior immune system, motivates avoidance before infection occurs, protects at low cost compared to illness. So the key production are strong response to contamination cues, cross-cultural consistency, and immune activation triggered by these cues. For example, elevated body temperature. Expanded disgust triggers. We are talking some stuff that triggers our disgust, our disgust. In Portuguese is nojo, nojo. Spoiled or contaminated food triggers our disgust. Parasite and insects, poor hygiene and disease cues, sexual behaviors increasing infection risk. So disgust is not only for food, but we have to sexual disgust. Sexual disgust targets make choice decisions, reduce exposure to infected partners, operates alongside sexual attraction mechanism. Flexibility of disgust can be overridden when costs exceed benefit. For example, we are more flexible with our disgust when, for example, we are caring for our kind, for our kin. For example, we are changing the diapers. That is kind of disgust, but some mothers in some studies that are showed in the book to tell that their children feces are less disgust than other children feces, even when the label are wrong. For example, I label this as my child feces, and imagine that I'm a woman. I label this as my child feces, and this is other my friend Kevin feces, and these feces are labeled wrong. This is like here appears Kevin children feces, here appear Paulo children feces. Even when it's mislabeled, I tend to say that this feces of Kevin that appears on Kevin is more disgust than the other that appears on Paulo. Nice. Um, for social bonding, we have some flexibility of discuss too, and extreme survival context. For example, when people are like in shortage of food, they tend to be cannibals and all of that. This is mad crazy, but this is for survival, is Darwin like to say. Okay, perfect. Um, so the flexibility of disgust demonstrates adaptive calibration, not rigidity. Pregnancy sickness as adaptation. Pregnancy sickness peaks during organ formation of the fetus. Targets foods high in toxin or pathogens. So yeah, reduces fetal exposure to teratogens. Yeah, for example, the I don't know how to say in English, but in Portuguese is pimenta. I will put here the exactly word in English. So pimenta have some teratogen, some cancerogen substance on it. So it's a good point. It's a good point. This appears after sensitive developmental period associated with lower miscarriages rates. So women would tend to be more sick during pregnancy. They tend to have lower miscarriages rates. This is a good point. So this is a good point. And for example, we here on food too. For example, in him, I forgot what I would say. But let's keep going. Fire in cooking. Perhaps I remember when I'm talking with you guys. Fire in cooking. Cooking increased caloric yield, supports energetic demands or large brains, enables meat and tuber consumption. Debates remains about this fire and cooking stuff. Archaeological evidence is limited. Timing of cookers is still uncertain. Spices, this is what I wanted to talk about. Spices and pathogen defenses. Spices contain antimicrobial compounds, reduce food spoilage and toxin. Cultural partners reflects ecological pressure. This is a good point. This is what I wanted to talk about. For example, there are more spices in more hot climates country, and they tend to be less spices in more cold countries. You understand that? That's why I think We studied that on school here in Mozambique. That the Portuguese went to India to search for spices. They traveled all the continent, all the ocean, because they wanted spices. And this data too proves that in India we have a lot of spices in meat than in other colder climates. Perfect. Alcohol as evolutionary mismatch. Attraction to ethanol derives from food consumption. Modern alcohol concentration exceed ancestral exposure. Alcohol's abuse reflects environmental mismatch. Following talking about habitat selection. Preference for open landscapes with refuge and visibility. We humans tend to prefer this type of environment to live. Natural views reduce stress and promotes healing. For example, there was some study that was made that the books presents that patients who are in on the hospital, who are sick and have to stay in the hospital, when their room is have a window and is pointing to a tree, they tend to heal more soon, more early. This is a good point. This is a great point. So our friends, our engineers, civil engineers, my brother Delvio Malakias, this is a good point too. When you are making your house and that, remember that patients with with some disease who are staying in the hospital, when their room is have like view for a tree, they tend to heal more early. Great point, my friend. High salute for Delvio Malakias. Fear phobias and adaptive biases. Fear systems evolve to manage recurrent threats. Overgeneralization favors survival. There are 6 responses from fear that the books present. First, freeze, flee, fight, submit, play dead, and faint. Ancestral fear biases. There's a biases about these ancestral and fear. Stronger fears for evolutionary ancient threats, snakes, predators, and on and on and on. And weak fears for modern dangers. And if you see today, what is killing more are not the snakes, are not the predators, but are the cars, accidents, and other type of of threats. So we fear more the snake because our ancestral. We don't fear too much the car, for example. So yeah. Male strangers historically posed greater risks. So there was a study that were made that children rate male stranger as more dangerous than they rate female stranger as dangerous. So because of this, male stranger historically posed greater risk. So great point. Third, medicine, fever. So fever inhibits pathogens. Suppressing fever can worsen outcomes, demonstrates evolved immune system. For example, animals with cold blood, who really they are the these scientific, they have cold blood, like lizards. When they are sick, they tend to go for a rock that is hot, and they tend to like stay with the rock hog so that their body can hot too, and they can they can kill the pathogens. Other great point is iron depletion. Iron limits bacterial growth. So less iron, bacteria don't thrive. More iron, bacteria thrives a lot. Body reduces iron intake and absorption during illness. Medical interference with this iron stuff can be very dangerous. And this is for my friends in the health sciences, physicians, physiotherapists, and on, all of them. So know that iron, bacteria like iron. So know that when your patient is sick, have a disease, don't prescribe them iron supplements. So yeah, the book says that this stuff about iron, it was no in the one in the 70s, in the 70s they already knew about this iron problem. So bacteria like iron, so they can they can grow. And when we are sick, we tend to produce more leukocytes. And when the leukocytes are produced, they tend to lower the iron. I think the leukocyte eats the iron. I don't know. I'm not sure of that. But this type of leukocytes is true. I don't know if they eat, but it's a stuff so we can learn together. If you know, comment here. You search and we learn together. We're gonna talk about a more sensitive theme. There is suicide and evolutionary perspectives. Suicide risks increases when perceived fitness theory is low, or inclusive fitness theory is that theory that says that we tend to pass our gene not only by having our own children but by helping our kin to survive and reproduce. This is inclusive fitness theory. When this perceived inclusive fitness theory is low, suicide risk increases. That's why, my friend, if you are feeling a little bit down and everything, I highly recommend you to be more useful. Find some stuff, be useful, and you will see that you will have like more self-esteem and more power in life. So being useful is very important. Even Elon Musk, the richest man in the world currently, says that his advice for the youngins is to be useful. This video that I'm making, I'm being useful for you guys. So yeah, and I feel good about it. And suicide, the triggers differ by sex. For example, men, when they lose when they lose status, they tend to do have suicide or suicide attempts more than women when they lose status. For example, when they lose a job, women don't care too much about this status stuff, but women have tend to have more suicide attempts or suicide when they lose a romantic bond, for example, or a boyfriend or anything like that. This is seen as a maladaptive response to evolved pressures. So, the core takeaways of chapter 3 is the human evolved multiple psychological and physiological defense. This mechanism starts through food safety, disease avoidance, predation, social threats. Modern environment can misfire or override these adaptations. So, my friend, we are finished with this chapter resume. It was a little bit longer than the other ones, but we had a lot of great stuff to talk, so I don't see any problem. So I hope you enjoyed, I hope you learned something, and wait for chapter full summary. Bye bye, my friend. Stay well and be useful.